Tomorrow I thought we'd try a short story by Grace Paley that appeared in Ms. magazine some time ago. It's called The Long Distance Runner. So until tomorrow then, take it easy, but take it.
Once in a while, I'm always talking to myself.
It's the first edition you got here, Loretta.
Thanks so much.
This is Chicago. I might have the privilege someday, if things go bad, of jumping off a bridge named after me.
To the contrary, I'm a conservative. I want to conserve life, I want to conserve the future, and conserve this planet and its environment. That's what it's all about.
Got you covered. That's it. You can't top that.
Everything that happened to us down south, we said it's not permanent because there's always a Chicago and a Detroit and a New York.
They all got their own bullshit. You know what I mean? They all laid a bullshit down that they don't want it. Don't give me that
Then you have an opinion openly expressed.
I guess guerrilla journalist is a pretty good way of describing what I do. Well, guerrilla fighters are what? Someone knows that terrain, right? In the American Revolution, Ethan Allen, we had guerrilla fighters against the redcoats. I know the terrain pretty well. And I horse around and goof around like a guerrilla journalist would. Not with the big shots, you see.
Studs was an outsider for most of his life, in the sense of being a political outsider.
Are you ready? Let's take that off for Bond.
In the sense of being so outspoken that the mainstream really rejected him. He was accused of being a commie and blacklisted in the 50s. He was treated in a way that was not revered the way he has been in the last 20 years of his life.
Mr. Studs Terkel.
History is so often told from the top down through the voice of statesmen and politicians. But what Studs has done is to tell history from the bottom up, through the voices and hearts and stories of us, of regular people, of everyday people.
And the reason that the crime is so great.
People see in Studs what I think they would like to see in themselves. Someone who has stood up for all of the right causes along the line. Also, someone who has met the most interesting people of almost the last century.
People say, you're an oral historian. I'm not a historian. Historian is more one scholarly. I hardly have a footnote. No. And I just talk to people.
You know, I'm sitting with Florence Scala, which is a story in itself. Florence was the very first hero, I say. The bomb fell. It was the atomic bomb.
Leonora and the Forza del Destino in this aria.
Well, I go back with great nostalgia.
Dr. King, this dream, when did this dream first come to you?
Well, this has always been my dream.
How do you feel about it? You were the pilot of that plane.
Definitely. Yes, I was the pilot.
And it was called the Enola Gay.
These are 10-inch reels, 1-hour tapes. Perhaps they're anywhere between 7,000 and 9,000 hours. And these are some of the names of some of the people. Some you will not recognize, some you will perhaps. Emlyn Williams, the Welsh actor and playwright. Tucker, as in Richard Tucker.
I've always regarded myself as an incomplete person, and consequently,
I'm sick of everything being blamed on the Times and the unrest and all that.
And he makes up his song in the first place.
This is a collection of my work at WFMT. Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, Gauguin. They brought the artist Gauguin's son to America, Emile Gauguin. It was a remarkable interview. I didn't understand half the words he said, but it worked out. Here is the beginning of the cataloging of the books put in the tape. This is the Spectator, but also part of the Great Divide, and these are the people: Catherine Dunham, John Kenneth Galbraith. These are some of the other books who were here. American Dreams, and these are names you won't recognize, the great many. Ed Sadlowski, the old man, the father of one of the steel workers. As you see, my life is divided into two separate parts. The part in the books had nothing to do with these 10-inch tapes you see here.
98.7 FM, this is WFMT, Chicago's fine art station. 10:15 tonight, broadcast.
WFMT, that station played a big role in my life. I was there for 45 years. And I was given an hour to do anything I wanted. So I'd read short stories and start talking. It was an eclectic program. Interviews came out accidentally. I was interviewing an art folk singer. His name was Richard Dyer Bennett. And a woman called up and said, "You should do that more often." I says, "Do what?" He says, "Have guests on your program like you just did." "What do you mean?" "Well, you see, when I hear you talking to that person, it's like I'm listening to people talking. It's not one of those processed things, conversation."
Well, he's often told the story. There was an English troupe that was there in Chicago in exchange for the second city that was in New York. And one of the stars in the group was a British actress called Eleanor Braun. And she mentioned him to me and said this was a really interesting guy, and I should look into him. So I got from FMT copies of the FMT Perspective, which was the magazine they published at the time, which had his interviews. And I realized immediately that, Studs was an extraordinary interviewer. I had rarely seen anyone get to the point, get to people's inner core the way he was able to do.
One day I got a call from Andre Schifrin in New York, a publisher. And he says, "How about you doing a book about ordinary people in Chicago?"
We had just published a book called Report from a Chinese Village. And I said to Studs, would he like to do Chicago as an American village? And of course, he laughed at the idea that a New Yorker would think of Chicago as not the second city, but as a village.
I said, "You out of your mind?" "Well, I did Division Street, America, a big city, Chicago."
Judy Huff came from the Deep South, and at the time of this conversation was teaching at a high school in the West Side Black Ghetto of Chicago.
Well, what's your relationship to the students? Are you strict?
Oh, I'm strict when I have to be, and I guess that's usually the first contact with the students is necessarily strict so that they know that I'm serious.
You prefer teaching at this inner city Negro school than a white suburban school?
Very definitely. And I've got other teachers who would agree with me. It's
Kid Pharaoh, ex-prize fighter. Are you scared of something?
Absolutely nothing. I'm an agnostic to begin with.
But nothing frightens you?
Nothing else. Not a thing frightened me. It's a dangerous society. If a man's brain can put a plane in the sky...
What is it they're afraid of? This is what? You are just breaking down this stereo thing that all Negroes are ignorant, they won't read, they won't do this, they don't try to help themselves. They're not really trying to worry so much about the Negro, they're worried about themselves.
So it's something about themselves.
That they're worried about. Not me, they're not interested in me.
The book is well received. About 3 months later, he says, "How about a book about the Great American Depression?" Young people know nothing about this. I say, "Are you out of your mind?" And suddenly I feel like I'm Adam, and he's the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I do hard times. And after that, working. And so it came to be.
And gradually we have the oral history of the U.S. since the 20s. That's his oeuvre. That's what he's achieved. It was such a new form, and it was such a different way of looking at people that everyone was sort of dazzled because they hadn't heard these voices before, especially the journalists and the historians who ought to have known, who ought to have had some idea of how ordinary people feel. They didn't.
Studs Terkel. Studs works out of Chicago. He wrote the bestseller Hard Times. He used to do a TV show, Studs Place. And he talks to people, on radio, on the street, everywhere.
I lived in Boston, and I was interested in coming to work in radio in Chicago.
And I knew that this Studs Terkel guy worked at WFMT because I'd seen him on television when I lived in New York back in the 70s, a show called The Great American Dream Machine.
I am a flag waver.
You
Hero,
say, hey, you say you love
but
me.
it don't put me in no bag.
Hey, listen, a while ago you were saying, listen to this, a while ago you were saying you like America because you're free to say your point. Is Agnew encouraging freedom of expression?
I think so.
You think he is, or you're putting me on?
He used to host a segment where regular people would get together and just yak, and it was remarkable. I mean, it was just regular people talking about the things they loved and hated and feared and all.
I want to ask, why do you feel Agnew stands head and shoulders above you?
He's vice president, I'm not.
The purpose of that program was to get them to talk, not me. I was the bartender. It's as simple as that, ran a bar. But I let them take over, now and then prod one or two.
And it's going to take possibly 30 years. And we're going to have to look back and find out whether Vietnam was a threat or was not a threat to the United States. No, you might smile, but this is a fact. This is a fact. The thing is, in the meantime, the country is dissolving. No. In the meantime, you're wrecking the country from the inside. No, you're not wrecking the country from the outside.
Divided, George. There's those of you people like yourself.
Like me, too.
And like Mike here, who are just go along blindly with the administration.
I never went along blindly with nothing.
The only thing I would appreciate is when I do interject something here is that you be a gentleman enough to keep your mouth shut.
Okay.
So I can say.
We have processed foods, don't we? We have processed thought as well. We have 30-second sound bites. Fresh food. So we're looking for fresh food for thought. It's the voice of the people themselves telling of their lives and experiences.
He said the country is being divided by these people who believe we should just blindly go along and believe everything the administration says and take 70% of our dollar for the Pentagon and the war machine and all the rest of that junk. And you sit there and say, yeah. Well, 30 years from now, we may find out if we were right or we were wrong. Well, I'm not interested 30, 40 years from now if we're right or wrong. I want to know now.
But you're
We used to call the people in this bar in Chicago Studs people. How did you get to know some of these people?
Well, it began accidentally. My folks had a hotel. First my father ran it, got sick, then my mother ran it. I think that hotel was my college, really. It's not a question of anti-book. Books are important. Reading, literacy is important, but it's also wisdom of the streets, a combination of the two. That hotel were a lot of self-educated guys, and they had arguments, and listening to arguments and debates, even fueled by whiskey or a shot or two. It was exciting. I think that played a role in my interest in the life of people we call, quote-unquote, ordinary, a word I don't like.
Studs has had this incredibly kind of checkered career. He went to law school, as many people don't know, never thought to practice law, fell in love with radio soap operas.
I'm Sammy the Whammy.
Well, scrammy, Sammy.
I'm from the Un-Brooklyn Activities Committee.
Chicago was the home of radio soap operas, more than New York and Hollywood put together.
And he mostly, as I used to say, reckon I always used to play gangsters. They thought I had this voice that was a gangster's voice.
And his line would always be trying to get some poor victim into a closet. All right, get in there.
The only trouble is I get killed every time. It was terrible tenure, but many jobs. So I did that for a long time. And then one thing led to another, and then came TV.
Welcome to Studs Place. It's just a little place in the neighborhood. The food is good, the prices are reasonable, and the people you meet there are, well, let's drop in and see.
Studs Place was a restaurant, sort of, in the neighborhood that I ran.
And now, let's see what's happening at Studs Place.
Can't save it forever. After all, I'm 39, pushing 40. Gotta go when the wagon comes.
There was a waitress, Gracie, played by a marvelous actress, Beverly Younger.
Until she came along, the waitress, the gum-chewing Brooklynese, the stereotype. She saw the waitresses in these diners, women of certain mother wit, intelligence, maybe not well-read, but intelligent.
Will you talk to Louie about some bouillabaisse? We'll think about different cuisine, huh?
Fancy taste, huh?
Yeah, and
what are we going to use for finger bowls?
All right,
cream of wheat dish?
Listen, no sarcasm, please, huh?
Oh, gee, sorry you didn't appreciate our little presentation.
I had a friend named Win Strachey, There's a guy I knew who happened to be a singer, and he was a handyman, self-educated.
Got this book of the opera here, all the stories, all the libretti complete. The who?
So we wrote our own script. Every week something happened. But that something, people still think there was a Studs Place. You see, it would say at the end, dialogue by the cast.
See, that and Garraway at Large and Cooker Van Hollywood were called TV Chicago style, because it had that improvisatory air, as indeed as though it were done in a jazz fashion.
I feel in the mood for a real party tomorrow night. How about calling the fellas of the bowling team, huh? Call all the fellas.
TV was still frontier country, and so it was in the hands of the writer, the director, and the actor, the creative spirits, so-called. Well, Studs Place is very hot, but then things popped. I had signed many petitions. I never met a petition I didn't like, you know. And so I signed a petition anti-Jim Crow before the word civil rights came forth. This is the 50s, early 50s.
Now, Mr. Chairman, do I have the floor or do I not?
But then came McCarthy. Then came the Cold War. The guy comes in from New York, and they gather around me, the group Chicago, and they say, gee, Studs, you're a valuable property. I love that word, property. Yeah, it's valuable property. But we got to do something about this. Did you sign all these things? I says, yeah. Well, do you know the communists started these things? And that's when I get smart. That's when I said, well, suppose communists come out against cancer. Do I have to come out for cancer? Well, nobody laughed. The guy says, it's not very funny.
The whole blacklist thing was screwed up. I mean, even if you put aside the horror of it, of trying to keep people from their livelihoods because of their politics, it was handled incompetently.
Still saying, there's a way out, and this is it, easy way out. All you gotta say is you were duped, you were a fool, you were stupid, the commies got you, and you'll be okay. I said, but they didn't. Now to this day, and then I got fired. To this day, people say, Studs, you were so heroic. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. I was scared crapless. The fact is, my ego was at stake. What do you mean dumb? What do you mean stupid? What do you mean duped? It was my vanity, my ego. Some would say self-esteem. So that was it, so I got canned.
Obviously, it was very difficult for him to fall from he was really at the top of his profession into a situation where he couldn't get any kind of a job. And that's what the McCarthy period did. It really did punish people. And that was its purpose. I think this business about communists in government and so on is a lot of nonsense. McCarthy and the others couldn't care less. The point was to punish people who had been on the wrong side and to make it clear to everybody else, don't ever sign a petition again.
I guess it's fair to say that my childhood was strongly affected by the Red Scare. It was an overarching sense of anxiety that really permeated everything. But I don't think he could have been at ease with himself if he had betrayed his friends or sacrificed his principles in any way in this regard. And I admire that. I really do. I would like to think I would have done the same thing.
Most people would have gotten discouraged by the McCarthy period, and a great many were. When the FBI came to visit him at home, he made fun of them. When the stations say, all you have to do is sign these affidavits and so on, he refused to do so. So he was very courageous. He doesn't boast about it, doesn't give that impression, but that's what he was. That's the right word for it.
I wasn't working for a while. Or getting $100 or so for a lecture here and there. And then I heard this radio, WFMT. I hear a Woody Guthrie song, Woody Guthrie, a dust. Well, no one played Woody Guthrie in Chicago except me. I called up and I said, hey, I'd like to work for you guys. They knew it was me, I was known in town. They said, well, we'd be delighted, but we're flat broke. I said, well, I am too, so we start even. I'd worked there 45 years.
Every day, 5 days a week, he would do interviews with writers,
musicians, performers, activists.
He would have on a week on his radio show, he'd have Ella Fitzgerald, followed by the young Bob Dylan.
I think I may remember best the conversations with writers, which he was so good at doing, because of course he always read the book.
If I respect the person, I have him on my program. If I don't respect his writing, I don't have him on the program. If you respect the person, you read his work.
I was on a show once for a novel I had written, and he had the novel in front of him, and I'm looking and he's flipping pages. Every page was annotated by him. I mean, he didn't have his staff do it. He had read the book, which is actually fairly rare on those kind of shows, and he'd annotated it, and then he had a battle plan, but if something interesting came up, he was able to play a variation on it.
You were talking about yourself as a miner.
Oh, a gold prospector.
Gold prospector, yeah. What are the tools of your trade, you know? The
tools of
prospector
my
has
trade.
his, the pan or whatever he might have.
Yeah. Well, the obvious tool of my trade is the tape recorder. But I suppose the real tool is curiosity.
It's all the more remarkable that he is sort of our chief listener. I mean, the kind of premier listener in the United States, in that he's a prodigious talker. He is really a talker. So, in a way, he's a monument to restraint.
He'd write something down, and one of his assistants would come over, and because it was radio, the guy could just, he didn't have to worry about stepping into the frame, take the thing. And what it was he was, from what you were doing, thinking of a piece of music that he thought was perfect to play over the end of the show, and it would go into the technician in the booth, and they'd go find it. So it was usually 10 minutes at least before the end of the show. They'd have time to dig it out of the vault or whatever, because sometimes they were pretty obscure, but something that had happened in the interview clicked with him. That particular music would sum this conversation up.
Sitting with me, hearing Bessie Smith on this recording, is James Baldwin, brilliant young American writer. And as you listen to this, Jim, to this record of Bessie Smith, what's your feeling?
It's very hard to describe that feeling. It's the way I want to write. When she says, "My house fell down and I can't live there no more," it's a great sentence. It's a great achievement.
The way you want to write, you say.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how few people know how to do an interview, and there have been many people who have tried to imitate Studs and have failed at doing so.
The dynamic during an interview is kind of like watching jazz at work, or listening to jazz, because he's so skilled as a musician or as an interviewer that he just starts to improvise and riff.
You feel your years in Europe afforded you more of a perspective?
Yeah, I began to see this country for the first time. And if I hadn't gone away, I would never have been able to see it. And if I had been able to see it, I would never have been able to forgive it. I'm not mad at this country anymore. I'm very worried about it. The country doesn't know. The country doesn't know what it's done to Negroes. But the country has no notion whatever, and this is disastrous, of what it's done to itself. And from my point of view, it shows on every single level of our lives, from the most public.
Could you expand on this a bit, Jim, what the country has done to itself?
Well, one of the reasons, for example, I think that our youth is so badly educated.
I have a feeling that Zero Mostel, the artist on the stage, is this way not only because you're a good actor and a good comedian, a good clown, a good burlesque comic,
but a good son,
and a good son,
father,
and a good
mother.
But something else involved here too.
Yes.
And that's you, in painting, the artist. Is there a question comes up? We speak of lack of communication of our day. And we speak of non-objective painting today and action painting. What's your feeling? What do you feel is authentic and what do you feel is false about this? It's a general question. Just want to get your feelings.
If you want a general answer.
No, I want a specific answer.
Well, you asked me a general question, then you want a specific answer? You are crazy, my boy. You are deeply crazy. Rephrase the question, otherwise I don't even attempt to answer it. Studsy?
Your feelings about trends in painting today.
First of all, how I feel about a painting.
He's always able to, like a dowser, find the well in somebody and get them to reveal themselves to themselves a lot.
There's something you said just now, Marlon Brando, we think so much of difficulty today in people communicating one with the other. You were just making a point that I feel of some significance. Difficulty in communicating with oneself. Who is the guy? Who are you? As James Baldwin often asks, who am I? The difficulty of finding out who you are.
I didn't quite understand.
Who are you is it seems to be your quest, finding out who you are. Isn't this basically the quest of all people? Isn't this yours specifically?
Well, I don't think it's the quest of all people, generally, no. I think that is it's the quest of a few people. There was a book by Gerald Sykes, and in this book he discusses issues that touch very pertinently on this theme. Most of them, I think, can be summed up in the famous phrase that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Suppose 200 million people were photographed. I don't mean privacy invaded, not that. I mean, suppose they were voluntarily in something, then all 200 million saying, that's me, I'm recognized, you see. So then there is no celebrity, you see. We're all celebrities.
Ed Sidlowski, steelworker all his life, living in South Chicago, union organizer for a time, director.
I am convinced the kind of person I find or look for is in every community, that one person or two, anywhere in the world, they're called by her first name or his first name, whom they know all their lives, but that added insight is what that person had.
Have conditions changed very much in the mill itself?
From that bull type of concept of sledgehammering and that, yeah, I'm not sure though that they haven't changed in some respects for the worse. Even though things are supposedly automated is the fashionable term, the guy is busting his butt though, in a lot of different ways, mentally, and even in some respects physically.
I see him also as a person who goes through life on the hunt for the stories and the metaphors that are going to celebrate the human spirit.
If there's any message that I get from what Studs Terkel does, there is poetry in the way the steelworker thinks about his job. There is poetry in the way a veteran talks about World War II.
Some of the times during the Depression when we were all starving, black women fed us. And at the same time we're taught in church, in school, that just because you're a lighter skin tone, that you're better.
One of the reasons why I think these books are so important, even though I'm unconnected with them, self-serving, is that history has been denied the young. As though we're suffering from a national Alzheimer's disease. There's no memory of yesterday. What was it like to be a kid in the 30s, seeing his father come home, a man who wants to work, and suddenly comes home 11 o'clock in the morning with his tool chest on his shoulder, meaning he was fired, and then as an idler for 10 years. What's it like to be part of that family?
I'm amazed that anybody could care, what happened to me. But Studs does such a wonderful job that it gives me a sense of who I am, of who I was, and my relation to other people in this country.
Let's talk about Working, because that's one of his best-known books.
Well, the idea came from the children's books, the Richard Scarry book on what do people do all day. And I thought, this is something we need to do for grown-ups.
The two prime impulses of the human are Leben, love, and Arbeit, and work. Love and work. Love meaning sex and work. Well, we know about the impulse, the strong impulse that sex is. Work is just as strong, says Freud, perceptively, because man, woman have always done this, some form or another. It's an extension of the person.
Studs loved the idea, and he started interviewing people.
Was really all kinds of different people in that book and different lengths of interviews.
He really was throwing a spotlight on a part of life that is essential to everyone, and about which, in a way, people talk about their sex life more than their work life.
There was something that he was onto there that really hadn't been done, before.
There are a number of people who like their work. The waitress is proud of her work, the stonemason who builds. But the great many, the work of a spot welder in an auto plant, standing there, what a violence to the spirit it is. Think of it, as he says to me, I got too many to keep them going crazy.
People are not really willing to say what the problems are, what they feel, and Studs got them to do so.
I think that's when, outside of Chicago, a lot of people discovered who he was. That book was something you'd see on the subway.
The play that was made of his book, Working, the musical, seems to me is now replaced Bye Bye Birdie as the standard high school play. It's the musical that every high school does.
It's true, the show it's 30 years later now, and it just goes on and on.
The greatest compliment I could get is not being translated into 12 languages. One is being taught by Kay Nichols here at the school. Another is receiving letters on frequent occasions from someone who says, after reading your book, I'll never again talk that way to a waitress. I'll never again be that sharp with a telephone operator. And so in a way, it's recognizing the other person's job, and thus the job, too, of the people of Girard to be recognized by the rest of the world.
That's just what he would do if his book was banned, was go to the town where it was banned and try to find out why.
Mr. Studs Terkel.
Turkel received more than a warm welcome from the students at Girard High. He received a standing ovation as he came to defend and explain the down-to-earth, profane language in his book, Working.
Can I ask you another question? Why are you here?
I am here because I'm curious as to what makes you tick.
Here he is encountering someone who would be so easy to judge.
Oh, listen, I want to talk to you. You know why I came here primarily? Because I want to meet you. I want to interview you for my next book. I wonder what it is. Let me finish, and then you'll have the floor, as long as you want. I wonder what impels people to go through 700 pages of a book that is generally acclaimed as a serious book to find those dirty words. Is it a fascination with those words? Do you think freely? If you think freely, you're an American. I don't give a damn what your politics are. If you are enclosed by fear, that's un-American. In all my books, this is the premise, this is the postulate, that people are basically decent. People do have a native intelligence, but day after day you call upon malevolence. Day after day you call upon smallness. Day after day you call upon trivia, and you make that the headline. Something must happen to people.
Emerson once wrote, "Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string." To believe that what could be true for you could be true for all people. Studs Terkel trusts himself, and as such, that part of him that's universal has great insight into the connection with everyone else.
Just like the rest of his kids, all right? Everybody here is
So when he speaks of an innate intelligence, he's speaking of himself, but he's also speaking about that aspect of Studs Terkel, which is in everyone. He has an understanding of the potential of America that few people have.
I'm glad you felt as you did. I thank you.
I can't.
Back in 2004, he fell down a flight of steps and injured his neck.
I remember seeing him in the hospital, and it must have been 2 or 3 years ago when he had the heart problem, and there was no way. It was over. And within 3 weeks, he was home, and within a month, he was writing again.
I want you to start the interview the way that you said that you wanted to start it.
See, that is me, as I was some years ago. Now you take that away and look at me. And it's not aging, it's not illness, it's too much Paris Hilton.
Hello again, I'm Kathleen Dunn. You're listening to the Ideas Network.
His vitality it's just unbelievable.
Studs Terkel is our guest this hour. Studs has written his second memoir. He's 95 years old now. Studs calls himself a radical conservative. He talks about...
He's going to go out screaming.
Age, the evil of
He's
banality.
going to go out screaming, because the world, whenever he does go, the world is not going to flip and be the sort of place Studs Terkel dreams it would be, or one day thought it could be.
He's won all kinds of awards and honors, a Presidential National Humanities Medal.
He will think he didn't do enough to help change it.
So I'm seeing this woman in a housing project. She's had 5th grade education. I knew she'd be interesting. So I come up with a tape recorder and I press a button and she says, "Sir, you pressed the wrong button. Nothing is moving." And so that moment changed everything. I pressed the right button. But the big thing is, from that moment, I was no longer a hot shot from 60 Minutes or Today. I was a guy, I was the one in trouble. I needed her. She didn't need me. And to feel needed is an essential to all human beings.
Right.
To count, to matter.
We are more and more less and less aware of the pain of the other. And he talks about how we are losing the human touch.
Except the final one, to let out the old 1200.
Everybody who plays music in a century is not a great musician. Everybody who writes a novel in a century is not a great novelist. We understand that there are certain gifts.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I gotta get home now and catch.
I don't think that everybody has the same depth of curiosity, and not everybody has the same depth of understanding. He's been absorbing and telling a huge American story for a long, long time. And it's rare. It's just rare.
Before I close, I love to quote now and then William Sloane Coffin Jr. And he's offering this invocation to a graduating class. And he goes on to say, "You must have a lover's quarrel with the world. Because if you have that quarrel, there'll be that battle for trust and for beauty and for understanding. But you must quarrel with it. You must dissent if need be." At the very end, he says, "Take your minds and think through them. Take your lips and speak through them. Take your hearts and set them on fire." Amen.
I like what I do. I like my work, and I enjoy my work. I don't play down anymore. I do it, you know, and if that affects someone, fine. Apparently it has, and some few, and that's good. That's a bonus. The fact is, there is a certain life being lived by a certain person. He's a car parker. She is a waitress, and this is the life, and they've told it to me a certain way, and I put it down a certain way. You have that camera, you see it a certain way. I like my daily radio program, what I'm doing.
How long are you going to do that?
As long as I can. I like that.
How old are you?
I'm 60, I'll be 63. This is 1975, May 16th. I was born in 1912.
In Chicago?
1912. No, I was born in New York City, but came here as a little kid. But 1912 is the year the Titanic went down. That's the year I came up.